Yo, what's going on, guys? Koi here. Today we're going to be talking about pretty much the downfall of Divas creation. So yeah, it's just one of those videos, man. So, coming from my perspective, I'm one of the last content creators to ever make videos on the game. I was also one of the best content creators to make videos on the game. I'm not partnered with them at all, nor have they ever accepted my invitation to being part of their creative program. And I literally played the game all the way up until the end. The only issue is that I just never got to max level because max level was just released yesterday, and it just does everything that just doesn't make any sense. And I'm going to explain my piece on why the game's dead pretty much, and why it's probably not going to get to the same point that it was before. I feel like it's going to get some type of love in the future if they end up doing everything right, but I'm going to tell you exactly what they did wrong, pretty much, that led to the game's death. And I've played a lot of games from the past year that I've been doing this content creation stuff. I've seen a lot of games die, fall off, and stuff like that. But the issue is that this was entirely dodgeable, and the only reason they actually still you know lost was literally just because they kept focusing on trying to make money, and that's what led to the game's downfall. So first things first, they kneecapped everybody at the beginning of the game when the game first released by making it incredibly hard to progress, by extending the amount of levels that you need to grind for new players to even get further into the game. That was one quality of life change that they barely made a change to. Now months into the future, as the game finally gets to that point where the game's finally out, and it's been out for a very long time and people stop playing, and now those early game players they could have had, they're all gone now. You know what I mean? And with that being the case, you can't really say that they're going to come back just because it's easier to level up and easier to get the gear at the beginning of the game. That should have been the beginning of the game. It should have been harder to get further into the game, not at the beginning of the game. So that was number one. I think mobility was definitely just a small one, more of a small quality of life issue. People should have been able to get stuff like horses and stuff off rip, which they barely added at level 10 and above right now. So honestly, that was such a late addition to the game that probably would have kept a lot of the newer players also running around and just playing the game in general. Next is leveling up. Leveling up was an absolute pain, and they also kneecapped you to the point where you only got some to certain levels, and they forced you to stay at that level. For instance, they forced people to pretty much be at level 50, and then level 60. Then they want you to come back a month later and get to level freaking how do you say, level 75. Then it was level 80. Then it was level 100. Now today being level 100 as the game uh as what they did to pretty much make it easier is to just level up all the freaking enemies in the game, but not give them the appropriate EXP management in order to make it easier to level up, so to speak. So, with that being the case, all it is just saying, oh, you could get that EXP still. The only issue is the EXP is still very hard to get because the requirements are just so ridiculous. So, with that being the case, of course, the developers are just not going to they're not worried about that. What they're worried about is making that cash. And this is where the battle pass comes into question. And the battle pass has pretty much killed most of the game in general because it killed one of the greatest things that the game had, which was a open market. Now, when you're grinding for something in a game, normally you grind for it to be in your possession, and for it to be rare, and for it to be worth it. But that was literally just destroyed by the way that they handled the battle pass. They one made it only to where you could get to level 100 to even get the battle pass, making it only available at a certain point. Uh, Now today, after months of playing the game, now today is the day that the battle pass is like finally fully available. But what they did during those times was they kept adding on and adding on all the stuff that just released onto the battle pass. So all you had to get to do was level 100, and then finally you're finally able to get not just items that were pretty much useless at that point, like useless to get to level 100, but items that you could get from the dungeons, the super rare items like the radiant mounts and everything like that. Every single mount in the game, all that crazy stuff. But you had to spend money to do it. but that dodges everything that you would have gotten in the freaking dungeon. So anything that you could have gotten from the dungeon, anything that you could have gotten in the overworld through rare spawns, rare drops, and all the other stuff, and actually putting the hard work in and actually being able to get it, can be bypassed by just spending money, making it useless on the market, making people who would grind for that not even want to grind for it to begin with and just get it for pennies on the dollar. The other thing was the duplication and the hackers that pretty much killed the game as well. Because once hackers started creating scripts, the developers are too new in order to actually stop hackers from scripting. So now there's an influx of multiple different scripted items into the game, multiple armor sets at level 20, multiple weapons at level 10 or even further that are just already maxed out and finished out. And they're literally selling them for like $1 each, like super cheap. Like these things are like so dirt cheap. You could have a fully maxed out character with legendary gear if you spent $5 on eBay. Like that's how bad it is, because they didn't want to stop. They didn't want to roll back any of the crazy, hacks that happened. They just wanted to let it keep going, just cause they didn't want to have to deal with it. And they waited way too long to the point where they had to end up making those countermeasures months late, like a month later, because they barely realized, oh, maybe this isn't such a good thing to actually happen to the game. And people just quit, because what's the point of grinding, getting level 3 crafting, level 15 mining, level 15 wood cutting, having all these different spots if someone's got over 30,000 of the items that you even need to create another 1,000 swords over you, making everything that you do in the game absolutely useless, because other people are going to do that more than you. And I'm not going to diss the combat in the game. The only thing I'm going to diss is the fact that this actually ruined the PvP experience, because the amount of hacked gear in PvP for top rankers right now is absolutely insane, leading to people quitting PvP in general and just literally just saying that PvP is no longer useful in how do you say, Divas of Creation, and you should never do it. Like, there's no point. That's why there's no YouTuber that really pops off with like Divas of Creation PvP, because instead of having like a balanced PvP game, everything's so unbalanced because it was made for the PvE experience, leading to the game end up being absolutely chopped, and people stopped caring. Now, when people stop caring about stuff, that leads to them just pretty much saying, you know what, I'm just not going to do this ever again, and I'm not going to try. And finally, we get to the point where we are today, which is instead of getting an expansion that makes it easier to level up, now we are getting a new weapon that is all right at best, that people are like, okay, this is cool. You know what I mean? It's a scythe and mobile gameplay, which is very cool. But the problem is they never made any quality of life changes to make the game fun again. Now it's just at this position where people can play the game, but it's going to be the old experience with an easier start at the beginning, which is not what people wanted. Like the older players are just cooked, like they can't do anything. Older players have nothing to do. The dungeon content's absolutely boring and useless, and no one's going to do it unless they're absolutely held at knife point to do it the way they were whenever they had to level up to a certain point. So now you could level up, you could get to max level, you could get the battle pass if you wanted, but where does that leave the game in the future? Absolutely washed. There's no way the game is going to make a comeback at this rate, because the game in general is just requiring so much RNG, and that's the other part, is the RNG. But the RNG is probably the worst part, where you have different ways you could destroy anything that you've ever made in your game, such as weapons, swords, and everything, just for a chance to get it slightly better, where hackers could just spam and get that level 20 gear no problem. You have a chance at losing your shit at level 5. And if you want to risk it, you could, but it's just not worth it. Getting an item, trying to use blessed scrolls and everything like that is not worth it in the long run at all. And it's just so bad, so boring. And the fact that you could lose items like your sword, armor pieces that you worked very hard for, where hackers are able to literally just get that but better than you. is very sad. So it's a hacker's game, black marketer's game. I don't think the game's going to make a crazy comeback, but I think people should enjoy the experience that it had at the beginning. But do I think it's still going to have a future? Absolutely not. I think this is pretty much the last update for Divas of Creation in general to even make a slight comeback. And they fumbled it again by just making it just as pay to win as it was before the game even got its last update. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Take it easy and peace.